Class roles can seem difficult to comprehend at first. While some people think that it's easy to know what classes do just by seeing the name, they tend to be more nuanced than you may think. While there may be some variation from what's said in this video, it should lay down a good base for what classes do in most popular hero shooters and even some MOBAs. First, DPS. DPS is pretty self-explanatory. It's the main damage dealing class. Most casual gamers will tend to gravitate to this class as the DPS tends to get the most kills in the game and is one of the most simple to understand. However, it doesn't mean it's without nuance. While many people tend to think of a DPS as a more frontline class, a good DPS will almost never be in the front lines. While they have unrivaled DPS, they don't have the greatest survivability and aren't able to pick up as many kills without help. I feel like I've said DPS like 17 times. As such, DPS are sometimes referred to as carries, because when they get up and running, they could carry the game. Crazy. They tend to stick in the middle of the team, and they tend to be more mid-range class, because they can't take damage all that well, but they can use their damage to finish and honestly just take kills from full health. The frontliners, or tanks, are another of the more picked classes in most team games. Their main job is to soak up damage and not let their team die. They're also the most likely class to have some sort of crowd control. Crowd control skills are skills that are able to incapacitate or somehow slow groups of enemies. Good use of crowd control allows for them to stop the units behind them from taking damage, also stops the enemy team from doing things. It gets kind of annoying. They have the secondary role of softening up enemy units so that the DPS has an easier time killing them. Not as important because the DPS tends to put out lots of damage anyway, but still kind of important. There are two main playstyles of tanks in most games that have them: the point tank and the off tank. Point tanks are what you normally think of when you think of a tank. They're the ones that run in, soak up all of the damage, normally have a really big shield or whatever, but they have less damage, and most of the time they have more crowd control just because they're sitting on the point and they kind of need it. Off tanks are more of like a pincer strategy kind of tank, where they'll go around the enemy team and cut off backup and escape routes, so that's easier to win a team fight. While tanks and front lines tend to have lots of HP and defense, they fold pretty quickly to focus fire, which is why they need a support. Support classes tend to be the most confusing characters for people to pick up, as even though they seem simple on the surface, they require lots of knowledge on the position of both your enemies and the position of your teammates. Supports support their team in two different ways: by buffing and healing teammates, and by debuffing enemies, which the second one can lead them into play kind of similar to the tanks, where they're sitting up in the front line and throwing debuffs at the enemy instead of crowd control like the tanks do. But most supports tend to be squishier because they're healing everybody and they're giving people buffs. Healing supports tend to be the backbone of the team. I'm sure you know this by now, though. There's so many games where you need to have a healer or else you just kind of lose. It's to the point where even casual gamers know to kill the healer before they try and take out anyone else. Debuff supports tend to fly pretty under the radar because either you don't see them or you don't really notice them, but I think they're very close to healing supports and how impactful they can be to the team, because they just, instead of healing the teammates, they make the enemies do less damage, which basically makes the same thing. Buff supports are kind of rare to find, or at least buff supports that are balanced well are hard to find. But when they're well balanced, they can go kind of under the radar and still have enough impact to swing a team fight. However, supports tend to be the main target for pick classes. pick classes are some of the highest picked and least utilized classes overall. At least in TF2, right? Because you have the spy, and everybody picks spy, and nobody knows how to play spy. And it's so fun when there's a spy that doesn't know what he's doing. Pick classes go out and try to take favorable traits by picking off specific members of the enemy team, usually the healer, although sometimes it's also the tank if the tank's causing a lot of trouble. They tend to have some of the best movement in the game and the best damage, and that gets balanced out by having low health pools and range, unless you're playing a sniper, in which case you have basically infinite range, but basically no movement. Cancels out, probably, sometimes. Pick classes are there to cause chaos. They infiltrate the enemy backlines and take 1 or 2 kills before dying. But that leaves an opening for their team to go in and push the enemy or to regroup after a backfight. If you're playing a MOBA, they're called gankers. Most of the time. They're pretty similar. Gankers tend to be more roaming characters rather than pushing the backline characters. But they play very similarly in just trying to go find enemies and pick them off. I don't know, comment or subscribe or something. I don't know, I'm not good at outros. Bye!